In 2001, Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, stood on a stage, sweating profusely, as always, and shouted a phrase that would define a decade of corporate warfare. Linux is a cancer. To Ballmer and the Microsoft of the early 2000s, open-source software wasn't just a competitor. It was an ideological enemy. It was communism in code form. It threatened the very core of Microsoft's business model, which was selling proprietary licenses for Windows and Office. If people could get an operating system for free, why would they pay Microsoft hundreds of dollars? So, Microsoft declared war. They didn't just compete, they tried to destroy. They secretly funded lawsuits against Linux vendors like the infamous SEO group cases. They spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt to Fortune 500 CI, telling them that using Linux would expose them to intellectual property theft. They created internal memos, later leaked as the Halloween documents, which explicitly outlined strategies to decommoditize protocols and break open standards to stop Linux from gaining ground. It was a brutal, zero-sum game. Fast forward to 2016, Satya Nadella, the new CEO, stands in front of a giant screen. The screen doesn't show Windows. It doesn't show Office. It shows a heart. And inside the heart, it says, Microsoft loves Linux. The tech world gasped. Was this a joke? Was it a trap? No. It was the beginning of the greatest strategic pivot in the history of business. Today, Microsoft is the single largest contributor to open source projects on GitHub, a platform they now own. More than 50% of all virtual machines running on Microsoft Azure are running Linux, not Windows. Microsoft literally ships a full Linux kernel inside Windows 10 and 11. They built their own distribution of Linux called CBL Mariner. They released Net for Linux. They ported SQL Server to Linux. How did the evil empire become the biggest champion of the software they tried to kill? The answer isn't charity. It isn't a change of heart. It is a ruthless, calculated, trillion-dollar realization that the game had changed. Microsoft realized that fighting Linux was like fighting gravity. You can't win. So instead of fighting it, they decided to own the infrastructure it runs on. This is the story of how Microsoft stopped selling Windows to start selling the cloud, and how embracing their enemies saved them from erasure. To understand this shift, we have to look at the lost decade of Microsoft. From 2000 to 2010, Microsoft was stagnant. Their stock price was flat. They missed every major innovation. They missed mobile iPhone 1. They missed search, Google 1. They missed social, Facebook 1. They were still making billions from Windows, but they were becoming a dinosaur. The cool kids in Silicon Valley weren't using Windows. They were using Macs and deploying code to Linux servers on AWS Amazon Web Services. Amazon had invented the cloud, and the cloud ran on Linux. Why? Because when you are spinning up 10,000 servers, you don't want to pay 10,000 Windows license fees. You want a free, lightweight, customizable OS. You want Linux. The startup ecosystem companies like Uber, Airbnb, Netflix were all built on the Lampstack Linux, Apache, Miscal, PA. Microsoft was nowhere to be found. They tried to push Windows Azure initially, forcing people to use Net and Windows Server, but nobody wanted it. It was a ghost town. Satya Nadella saw the writing on the wall. He realized that in a cloud-first world, the operating system is just a commodity. It's a utility layer, like plumbing. Nobody cares about the plumbing. They care about the water. In the cloud era, the water is the application, the data, the AI model. And developers, the people building these applications, hated Windows. They hated the clunky interface, the lack of a proper terminal, the proprietary lock-in, the difficult package management. If Microsoft wanted to win the cloud war against Amazon, they needed developers. And to get developers, they had to give them Linux. They had to meet the developers where they were, not where Microsoft wanted them to be. The strategy was executed in 3 brilliant surgical phases. Phase 1. The Trojan Horse. In 2016, Microsoft introduced WSL Windows Subsystem for Linux. This was a shock to the system. It allowed developers to run a real Ubuntu terminal directly inside Windows, without a dual boot or a slow virtual machine. Suddenly, a web developer could use Windows for gaming and Photoshop, but use Linux tools like Bash, grep, Docker, and Node.js for work. It stopped the bleeding. Developers stopped buying MacBooks because Windows was finally good enough for development. It kept the developers on the Windows desktop, even if they were writing code for Linux servers. It was a defensive move to protect the Windows user base from migrating to macOS. Phase 2. The acquisition. In 2018, Microsoft bought GitHub for $7.5 billion. The internet screamed, "Microsoft is going to destroy GitHub. They are going to spy on our code. They will make private repos paid." People threatened to move to GitLab. But Microsoft played it cool. Instead of ruining GitHub, they made private repositories free. They improved the platform. They integrated it with VS Code, another Microsoft product that is open source and dominates the market. By owning the place where code lives, GitHub, and the tool used to write it, VS Code, Microsoft embedded itself into the workflow of every developer on Earth, regardless of what OS they used. They bought the town square of open source. This gave them incredible data and leverage. They knew what libraries were popular, what languages were trending, and they could subtly steer the ecosystem towards Azure. Phase 3. The Cloud Monopoly. This is the endgame Azure. Microsoft doesn't care if you run Windows Server, Ubuntu, Red Hat, or they just want you to run it on Azure. They want you to rent their chips, their storage, their AI accelerators. By supporting Linux first class, they remove the friction. If a startup wants to deploy a Docker container, which is native to Linux, they can do it on Azure instantly. Microsoft realized that the money isn't in the license. It's in the compute usage. They moved from a rent-seeker model selling permission to use software to a landlord model charging rent for the digital space. They own the digital land, and they are happy to let you build whatever house you want on it, even a Linux house, as long as you pay the rent every month. This strategy paid off spectacularly. Microsoft's stock price has quintupled under Nadella. They are valued at over $3 trillion. They essentially printed money by admitting they were wrong. But there is a darker side to this love. It's a strategy known as embrace, extinguish. Microsoft used this in the 90s to kill competitors like Netscape and Java. First, you embrace a standard like HTML, then you extend it with proprietary features that only work on your platform. Finally, you extinguish the competition because everyone is locked into your proprietary features. Is Microsoft doing this with Linux? Critics say yes. Look at VS Code. It's open source. Yes, the repository is right there on GitHub. But the official build that everyone downloads and uses contains proprietary telemetry and extensions that only work with Microsoft's version. The Python extension for VS Code, which is essential for AI, is proprietary. The remote development extensions are proprietary. They are building a proprietary layer on top of open source tools. Look at GitHub Copilot. It trains on open source code written by the community. Bit is a paid proprietary product owned by Microsoft. They are embracing open source to train their proprietary AI models. They are extending Linux with WSL to keep you on Windows. Are they planning to extinguish? Probably not. Linux itself fits too big, too decentralized, but they are certainly extinguishing the idea of a free internet. The internet is becoming a series of walled gardens owned by 3 or 4 giants, and Microsoft has built the most comfortable garden of all. We also have to talk about the AI revolution. This is where the Linux strategy becomes critical. The modern AI boom is built entirely on Linux AI models, like GPT-4, which Microsoft effectively owns via their massive investment in OpenAI, run on Linux. The entire AI ecosystem, PyTorch, TensorFlow, CUDA, Hugging Face is native to Linux. You cannot train a massive large language model on Windows Server. The tools just don't exist. or are second-class citizens. If Microsoft had stayed stubborn, if they had insisted on a Windows-only world, they would have been left out of the AI boom completely. They would be IBM by loving Linux, by integrating it into Azure. They ensured that Azure is the best place to train and run AI. They essentially future-proofed their company for the next 20 years. There is a profound lesson here for your career and your business. Ideology is expensive. Dogma is fatal. Ballmer failed because he was ideological. He hated Linux because it didn't fit his worldview of proprietary software. Nadella succeeded because he was pragmatic. He saw where the value was shifting and moved the company there, even if it meant killing their sacred cows. In technology, you have to be water. You have to adapt to the container you are in. If the world moves to Linux, you learn Linux. If the world moves to cloud, you learn cloud. If the world moves to AI, you learn AI. Clinging to the past because that how we've always done it, is the fastest way to bankruptcy. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth about the modern tech landscape. The barrier to entry has shifted. It used to be financial buying a Windows license or a server. Now, the barrier is complexity. To build a modern application on Azure, you need to understand a dizzying array of technologies: Linux, Docker, Kubernetes, networking, VNETs, subnets, security, IAM, RBAC, and automation languages like Python and Terraform. You can't just click next, next, finish anymore. The tools are powerful, but they are complex. Microsoft has made it easy to pay them, but hard to leave them. This is the Hotel California of cloud computing. You can check out anytime you like, but your data can never leave without massive egress fees. So, does Microsoft love Linux? No. Microsoft loves money. And right now, Linux is made of money. They recognize that open source won the infrastructure war. They stopped trying to sell the OS and started selling the service. It is the ultimate pivot. They turned their biggest enemy into their most profitable employee. They successfully colonized the open source world. If you want to survive in this new world, you need to understand the tools that won the war. You cannot be a Windows developer or a Linux developer anymore. You have to be a cloud engineer. You have to understand the full stack. You need to know how to navigate the command line, how to manage permissions, how to script automation, and how to secure these complex environments. The market doesn't pay for loyalty to an OS. It pays for the ability to solve problems at scale. If you are tired of being confused by the complexity of the cloud, if you want to understand how Linux actually works under the hood, not just clicking buttons in a portal, how to automate it with Python, and how to secure it against hackers because the cloud is a dangerous place, full of misconfigured buckets and open ports, I have created a path for you. It's called the Hacker's Blueprint. It is a trace-in-one bundle designed to give you the hard, technical skills that the market is screaming for. It includes the ethical hacking manual so you understand security from the offensive side, learning how attackers exploit Linux servers so you can defend them, and the cybersecurity protocol to understand the networks that run the cloud. The TCP/IP layers that Azure is built upon. Don't be like Steve Ballmer, shouting at the tide to stop coming in. Be like Satya Nadella, adapt. Learn the new tools. Master the infrastructure. Click the link in the description. Get the bundle, stop being a passenger in the tech revolution, and start being a driver. The war is over. Linux won, and you need to be on the winning side.